Sayer Murne was the kind of man who never raised suspicion. Quiet, polite, and invisible in plain sight. Lirien Vosk, his girlfriend, was a devoted mother to her 2-year-old daughter Nemi, with dreams of finally breaking free from a relationship that had long since turned dark. But when all three vanished one rainy night from their small-town home, only one body was found, and it wasn't Sayer's. What followed was a chilling unraveling of secrets, manipulation, and a trail of blood that revealed just how far a man would go to maintain control, even if it meant destroying everything he once claimed to love. Elridge Falls was the kind of town people described as untouched by time. Nestled between rolling hills and dense woods, it was a place where strangers were rare, and secrets even rarer. The houses were modest but well kept, and people still left their doors unlocked at night. It was here, on a quiet cul-de-sac called Claridge Street, where Lirien Taves lived with her 2-year-old daughter, Nemi. Their small, pale blue home sat on the corner, framed by a white picket fence and a mailbox that always had a flower tucked into it. Lirien had lived in Elridge Falls her whole life and had worked at the town's only daycare centre for several years. She was known for her soft demeanour, quiet smile, and the way she always remembered every child's birthday. On Monday morning, something felt off. The daycare centre opened at 7, and Lirien was usually the first one there. By 7:30, the other staff began to worry. By 8 hours, the director started calling her phone. No answer. The phone rang and rang, eventually going to voicemail. This wasn't like Lirien. She was never late. By 9 someone from the centre drove to her house. Her car was in the driveway, but no one answered the door. Curtains were drawn. The porch light was still on. Something was wrong. A wellness check was requested from the local sheriff's office. 2 deputies arrived by mid-morning. They knocked, called out her name, and circled the property. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken windows, no open doors. One of the deputies peeked through a small gap in the curtains and saw a phone lying on the floor. Its screen cracked. It was enough to justify entry. What they found inside changed the town forever. The house was cold and still. A faint smell lingered in the air, metallic and unsettling. In the kitchen, Lirien Taves lay on the floor, her face turned to the side, her hands limp near her chest. She had been strangled, her neck showing deep bruising. No sign of a struggle, no overturned furniture or broken glass. Just her body, lifeless and oddly placed, like someone had taken time to position it. The refrigerator door was slightly ajar. A child's cup of milk sat untouched on the table. The worst was yet to come. In the small back bedroom, painted with soft pinks and decorated with cartoon animals, lay Nemi. Her tiny body was under a blanket, in her crib. No injuries were visible, but she wasn't breathing. A toy rabbit was still clutched in her hand. Her lips were pale, and her body cold. It was as if she had simply gone to sleep and never woken up. The scene offered no answers, only questions. Investigators arrived quickly, cordoning off the home. Forensics moved carefully through each room, photographing everything. There were no signs of robbery, no sign of forced entry. The front door had been locked from the inside. The only thing out of place was the silence, a loud, suffocating kind of silence that filled every room. Neighbors gathered in stunned silence outside the police tape. People cried. Some prayed. Everyone asked the same thing. Who could have done this? Lirien wasn't involved in anything dangerous. She didn't have enemies. She had kept to herself mostly, focusing on her daughter and her job. The only visitor she regularly had was her boyfriend, a man some of the neighbors didn't trust but had never seen do anything suspicious. The sheriff gave a brief statement to the press that afternoon, calling the deaths a double tragedy under active investigation. He offered no further comment, but behind closed doors, the officers already had one name on their minds: Sayer Murne. He was the last known person to be with Lirien, the last one seen at the house. And when they called him in for questioning, his reaction was far from what they expected. He wasn't shocked, he wasn't grieving, he was calm, too calm. But in Elridge Falls, even the calmest surface can hide the deepest rot. The peace had been broken, and the search for truth had only just begun. Sayer Murne was not a stranger to the people of Elridge Falls, but he was never truly part of the community either. He had moved to town just over a year ago, drifting in from a larger city and setting up a modest life as a freelance mechanic, tall, lean, and always wearing the same grease-stained jacket. Sayer kept to himself. Most people described him as polite but distant. Some found him odd, too quiet, always watching, rarely speaking. But no one had any reason to fear him. Then he met Lirien through a mutual acquaintance at the hardware store. Their relationship started quietly. At first, no one even knew they were dating. Eventually, neighbors began to see his truck parked in her driveway overnight. Lirien didn't talk much about him, but she had seemed happier for a while. People assumed things were going well. They weren't. When the news of Lirien and Nemi's deaths broke, Sayer was quick to appear at the station. Not because he was called, but because he walked in on his own. He claimed he had heard the news through a neighbor and wanted to help. Detectives found that unusual. Most people in shock react emotionally. They cry, they shake, they ask questions. Sayer was composed, controlled, and oddly focused. He sat in the interview room with his hands folded, answering each question with precision. He told investigators that he hadn't seen Lirien in 2 days. According to him, they had argued over something minor, and he had decided to give her space. He claimed he had spent the weekend working on a client's vehicle at a repair shop just outside town. The alibi seemed plausible at first, but when detectives began checking into his story, cracks began to form. The client he named said Sayer had only been there briefly to drop off parts. The shop's security cameras confirmed he had only stayed an hour. That left a long, unexplained gap on the night Lirien and Nemi died. Even more concerning was what police didn't find on Sayer. His phone had no recent messages from Lirien, despite them being in a relationship. A search through his digital records revealed that he had recently deleted his entire message history with her. Every text, every photo, every call log was gone. His social media had also been wiped just 2 days prior. This sudden digital cleanse made investigators uneasy. A neighbor on Claridge Street then came forward with a small but crucial detail. On the night of the murders, they had seen Sayer's black pickup parked outside Lirien's house at around 9:30 p.m. much later than he claimed to have left. Another neighbour remembered hearing a car start and drive off just after midnight. These observations didn't match Sayer's story, which placed him miles away. He was beginning to look less like a grieving boyfriend and more like someone with something to hide. Despite the inconsistencies, investigators had no hard evidence linking Sayer to the crime. There were no fingerprints at the scene that didn't belong. No weapon was found. The house was undisturbed. Whoever had done this had taken great care not to leave a trace. Still, the pattern of behaviour raised red flags. The deletion of digital records, the lack of grief, the clean clothes, the vague alibi. All of it formed a cloud of suspicion around Sayer, but suspicion alone wasn't enough to make an arrest. Frustrated but determined, detectives kept a close watch on him. They followed his movements, recorded his interactions, and quietly dug into his past. What they found didn't paint a comforting picture. Sayer had lived in 3 different towns over the last 6 years, always leaving suddenly, always under vague circumstances. In one town, a girlfriend had filed a restraining order. In another, a neighbour reported a violent outburst during a dispute. He had no formal charges, but he left a trail of unease wherever he went. Still, without physical evidence, the case was stalled. The town was restless, angry. People whispered about justice and demanded answers, but the killer, it seemed, had vanished into the fog of a perfect lie. Then came the unexpected turn, one that didn't come from a confession or a break in Sayer's story. It came from a place no one was looking, a place where truth had been tossed aside and nearly lost forever. A clue so small it could have gone unnoticed, but instead it would unravel everything. It was a chilly Thursday morning when the break finally came. Not from the crime scene, not from a witness, but from a sanitation worker doing his usual rounds in a neighbouring town called Avonbrook, 20 miles from Elridge Falls. While lifting bags into the back of his truck near a roadside motel, he noticed a black trash bag that felt unusually heavy and had a faint but unpleasant odour. Curious and slightly concerned, he opened it. Inside were blood-stained baby clothes, a woman's silver necklace with a tiny heart pendant, and torn pages from what looked like a personal journal. Alarmed, he called the police. Detectives from Elridge Falls were alerted within hours. The bag had been found behind the Shady Pines Motor Inn, a place not known for luxury, but cheap enough for people needing a temporary hideout. When the investigators arrived, they immediately began canvassing the area. Motel staff confirmed that Sayer Murne had checked into a room 2 nights after the murders and stayed only for a few hours. He paid in cash, gave a fake name, and never returned. The items in the trash were immediately taken into evidence. Forensic testing revealed that the blood on the baby clothes matched Nemi's DNA. The torn journal pages were written in Lirien's handwriting, some of them deeply personal, discussing her growing concerns about Sayer's behaviour, her fears of being watched, and her secret plan to leave him. One page, half-burned, read, "He told me I can't leave. He scares me. I don't know what he's capable of." Even more damning was the silver necklace. It had been seen in multiple photos of Lirien on her social media, something she wore almost daily. And on its clasp, forensic experts found a partial fingerprint. After careful examination, it was matched to Sayer Murne. The print alone wasn't enough to prove murder, but it placed him in possession of the victim's belongings after her death. Combined with the journal pages and bloodied clothing, it began to form a pattern, one Sayer could no longer explain away. The detectives returned to question him. When confronted with the motel evidence, Sayer didn't flinch. He claimed he had found the items in a box Lirien had given him before their breakup. According to him, he threw them away in frustration. But his story quickly fell apart when motel security footage showed him arriving late at night with a gym bag and leaving without it. The timeline, the location, the evidence, they all pointed to guilt. Sayer was taken into custody for questioning again. This time, his demeanor had shifted. He wasn't calm. He was guarded. He refused to speak without a lawyer. As the hours passed, he remained silent, but his body language betrayed him. Twitching fingers, darting eyes, clenched jaw. He was losing control of the narrative. Meanwhile, investigators continued combing through the items found in the trash. Among the torn papers was a receipt for a gas station purchase made minutes before Sayer arrived at the motel. The timestamp placed him far from his claimed location that night. Surveillance footage from that gas station showed him alone, wearing the same hoodie neighbors had seen him in the night of the murders. On the counter next to him sat a child's sippy cup, Nemi's, unmistakably identical to the one found in Lirien's kitchen. The mounting evidence painted a picture not of an innocent man caught in a tragic coincidence, but of a careful killer trying to erase his tracks. Yet, despite all of it, there was still one critical piece missing. Proof that Sayer had been in the house at the time of the murders. Without that, his defense could argue that he simply discovered the bodies and panicked, or that he was framed. Prosecutors needed something definitive, an irrefutable connection between Sayer and the moment of death. Little did they know that connection had already been recorded, not by security cameras or eyewitnesses, but by something small and forgotten, a quiet witness that had seen and heard everything. It would be the piece that pulled the entire case together and destroyed the illusion Sayer had so carefully built. Detectives were running out of patience. Every thread of evidence tightened the noose around Sayer Murne, yet the crucial element remained elusive, something to place him inside Lirien's home at the exact moment of the crime. The mounting pressure pushed the investigative team to re-examine every inch of the crime scene, especially the small, seemingly insignificant details. That's when a junior technician, going over the contents of the house's digital devices one final time, stumbled upon something unexpected: Nemi's baby monitor. The monitor had been found plugged into a wall outlet in Nemi's room. It was the kind with an integrated camera and audio recording feature, linked to a cloud storage app on Lirien's phone. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. The files were fragmented, and many recordings were short and quiet. But then came one file, time-stamped 12:16 a.m., the night of the murder. It was a 6-minute audio clip. For a moment, no one thought much of it. But as they played the recording, the room fell silent. The beginning of the clip was innocent. Just the soft rustling of a blanket, Nemi's tiny breathing, and the low hum of a white noise machine. But a few moments in, footsteps could be heard, slow, measured. Then a creak from the floorboards, the sound of a door opening. Then a pause. Nemi stirred slightly. Then came a voice, low, quiet, unmistakably male. Though the words were muffled, investigators would later confirm that it was Sayer's voice. The tone was not soothing. It was cold, commanding, and then, suddenly, the audio shifted. There was a thud, then a struggle, muffled cries, too soft to wake the neighbours but loud enough to send chills down the spine. It was followed by a long silence, then the distinct click of a door closing, and at the end, the most chilling sound of all, the faintest whimper, then nothing. It was all investigators needed. The audio placed Sayer inside the house well past midnight. More than that, it captured the act in real time. It was damning beyond question. The cloud storage on Lirien's phone had automatically backed up the audio, despite the monitor being damaged when officers first arrived. It had remained hidden in an obscure folder until someone thought to check deeper. The moment the discovery was confirmed, a warrant was issued for Sayer's arrest on 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was taken into custody without incident. There were no more lies, no more carefully crafted stories. He was done pretending. But even in custody, Sayer remained stone-faced, unflinching. He offered no confession, no admission, only silence. Prosecution moved quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. The audio recording, the fingerprint on the necklace, the timeline contradictions, the deletion of messages, the disposal of personal belongings, and the surveillance footage. One by one, the pieces fit together to reveal a deeply disturbing picture. The motive, it turned out, was rooted in control. Lirien had tried to leave him. She had been planning it for weeks. Her quiet withdrawal, her coded notes in her journal, everything pointed to a woman trying to escape a growing threat. When Sayer realized he was losing control, he didn't just lash out. He erased her and her child. News of the audio recording spread quickly through Elridge Falls. The peaceful town that once felt safe now felt haunted. People who had once nodded politely to Sayer at the gas station now recoiled at the mention of his name. Lirien's funeral was attended by hundreds. Nemi's tiny white coffin broke hearts across the state. Strangers sent flowers, schoolchildren wrote notes, and on the porch of Lirien's home, someone left a hand-drawn sign that read, "She tried to get away." The court case was set, but in the hearts of the people, the verdict was already clear. Sayer Murne was a monster, hiding in plain sight, but what no one yet knew, not even the detectives, was that there was one more piece of this story, hidden in the quiet corners of the past. Something buried, something that, once uncovered, would explain everything. The trial of Sayer Murne began on a cold January morning, nearly 10 months after the murders of Lirien and Nemi. The courtroom was packed. Local media covered every angle, while people from Elridge Falls lined up outside just to catch a glimpse of the man now known as the monster who had shattered their town's peace. Prosecutors presented their case with chilling precision. The baby monitor recording was played for the jury. Its haunting sounds filled the courtroom, leaving no space for denial. The defense barely tried to dispute the facts. Their argument focused on Sayer's mental state, claiming emotional instability and stress had led to a breakdown. But no one in that room believed it was anything but cold-blooded murder. The jury deliberated for less than a day. The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. Sayer Murne showed no reaction, no remorse, just a blank stare, as if the weight of 2 innocent lives meant nothing. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, but even as the case was closed in court, one final truth was still waiting in the shadows. An old case from a different town that would cast Sayer's past in an even darker light. After the trial, a retired detective named Nora Crenwell reached out to the Elridge Falls Police Department. She had been following the trial closely. Something about Sayer's photo had triggered a memory. Years ago, she had investigated the disappearance of a young woman named Kaylin Dreslow in the small town of Marrington, 3 states away. Kaylin had gone missing without a trace. Her case was eventually closed as unsolved. But Nora remembered one name from the reports. Her boyfriend at the time, a man named S. Murne. He had disappeared shortly after Kaylin vanished. There hadn't been enough evidence to pursue him then, and no one had heard from him since. Until now. With this new lead, detectives reopened the Marrington case and sent a team to review the files. Kaylin's journal was recovered from her family's home. In it were several disturbing entries about her boyfriend, how he had become controlling, how she had caught him lying, how he once followed her to work without telling her. Her final entry was dated one day before she disappeared. It read, "He says I belong to him. I'm scared. I think I'm going to leave tomorrow." The writing was eerily similar to what Lirien had written in her own journal, years later. 2 women, same fears, same outcome. Investigators searched property records and discovered that Sayer had once rented a storage unit in Marrington, though it had long since changed owners. A search of the grounds led to a grim discovery, buried in a shallow, unmarked grave behind the property. Bones, fabric, and a necklace Kaylin's mother later identified as her daughter's. The remains were confirmed to be Kaylin Dreslow through DNA testing. Sayer Murne wasn't just a murderer. He was a serial predator who had escaped justice once and never stopped hunting. He had perfected his control, learned how to hide, how to erase. What happened in Elridge Falls was not the start. It was the end of a dark trail he had been walking for years. The revelation stunned the town. The story made national headlines. In the aftermath, Lirien and Kaylin's families were connected through grief, finding strength in one another. A foundation was started in their names to support women in abusive relationships and bring attention to emotional and psychological warning signs often overlooked. As for Sayer, he remained locked away, silent and unrepentant. In the end, justice was served not because he confessed, but because the smallest, almost forgotten voices refused to stay silent. A baby monitor, a torn journal, a long cold trail, all came together to reveal a monster hiding in plain sight. The house on Claridge Street was eventually torn down, replaced by a garden of white lilies. A memorial stone stood in its centre, etched with the words, "They tried to escape. We heard them."